I've been an OTR trucker for about 13 years. I keep to myself, don't do drugs, don't screw with anyone's load, and I keep my logs clean. Always have. I take pride in that. So when I tell you that I know exactly where I've been and what roads I've driven, I mean it. I log every mile, I save receipts, and I even keep a notebook of rest stops and fuel ups, old school style. My dispatcher calls me obsessive, but I've never missed a delivery window, and I've never been pulled for a logbook discrepancy. Last summer, I did a Portland to Phoenix loop. Left Monday, was back in Portland Friday night. Pretty standard run. I took I-5 south, cut east through Bakersfield, dropped off in Phoenix, reloaded in Flagstaff, and hauled north through Salt Lake. Smooth all the way. Except when I got back, I noticed something weird in my truck's GPS history. There was a log detour, about 180 miles, through a remote part of Nevada. 2-lane roads near the Utah border. Thing is, I never drove that stretch. I didn't even fuel anywhere near there. My logs don't show it. My receipts don't show it. But the GPS has it stamped at 2:41 a.m. on Wednesday. Duration? Just over 3 hours. I thought maybe the GPS glitched, bounced signal or something. But that didn't make sense. My odometer showed extra miles too. Not a ton, just enough to line up with the GPS phantom trip. At first, I figured I must have taken a wrong turn and corrected it. Maybe I zoned out. Long nights can blur together. But then I checked the dashcam footage. I use a front and cab-facing dual camera system that records continuously while the truck's on. Pulled the micro SD and went to that Wednesday window. Everything looked normal until around 2:30 a.m. when the footage just stopped. It cut out for exactly 3 hours and 11 minutes. When it came back on, it showed me driving on a straight desert road. Empty land on both sides. No signage. Just darkness. I'm not talking footage corrupted or file missing. I mean the footage existed, black screen, engine humming, road noise, but no visuals, no movement, no lighting changes. Like the camera was on, but recording nothing. That really bothered me. So I pulled my personal phone history, hoping maybe I made a call or texted during that time. Nothing. No usage between 1:58 and 5:12 a.m. I checked my banking app, thinking maybe I stopped for food or gas and forgot. No charges posted overnight. But there was one thing. A toll charge. From a place called Windara Pass Booth. Timestamped at 3:47 a.m. Never heard of it. Tried Googling it. Nothing came up. No town named Windara. No toll road by that name. But the transaction existed. A $5.50 debit from a state toll service. At this point, I started to feel genuinely uneasy. The next day, a sheriff came to the yard in Portland. He asked for me by name. Asked to see my truck. Said he was investigating a missing person case. I asked if he had a warrant, and he said no, just questions. I played it cool, offered to chat outside the cab. He showed me a photo. A teenage girl, maybe 16. Blonde, tan skin, wearing a red hoodie. Said she was last seen walking along Route 93 just outside Eerie, Nevada. That's when the hair on my neck stood up, because that's the road the GPS said I'd driven during the blackout window. But I didn't remember any of that stretch. I told him I didn't go near Eerie. Showed him my route, fuel logs, bills of lading. He nodded, jotted a few things, and said I might be contacted again if anything new came up. Then he left. I couldn't stop thinking about that photo. So that night, I drove to a truck wash place I use and asked them to help me check the underside of the trailer, just to put my mind at ease. I hadn't used that trailer since the Phoenix run. It had been parked on the lot the whole time. They jacked it up, got under there with lights. On the rear axle beam, someone had zip-tied an old-school duffel bag, wedged behind the mud flap. Black canvas, taped over. Inside, a hoodie, red. A toothbrush. A flip phone with a shattered screen. A small, unopened water bottle. No ID. No blood or anything like that. Just someone's belongings. I didn't call the cops. I know how that sounds, and maybe I should have, but I panicked. I burned the bag that same night, at a fire pit behind a friend's property outside the city. Tossed the phone into the river the next day. I didn't know what the hell I was involved in, and I didn't want my name mixed into it any more than it already was. I scrubbed the GPS history and wiped the dash cam files. For the next few weeks, I kept checking the news. Her name was Elena Miles. Still missing. Last confirmed sighting was around a gas station in Eerie. That sheriff never came back. But a few nights later, parked at a rest stop off Highway 20 in Oregon, I found something on my windshield when I got back from the bathroom. It was a Polaroid, a picture of my truck taken from behind. In the shot, you can clearly see the zip-tied duffel still tucked under the axle. The photo wasn't folded or bent. No smudges. Just a clean, centered shot. Like whoever took it had plenty of time. Like they'd been following me, watching me, even before I found the bag. I haven't told anyone. Not dispatch. Not my family. Not even my mechanic buddy. I figure if someone wanted to hurt me, they've had plenty of chances. I started locking the cab from the inside even when I'm awake. I wedge a crowbar against the door now at night. I changed my dash cam system. I don't take nighttime routes anymore unless I absolutely have to. But every now and then, I get a toll charge. Always small. Always random roads I've never been on. I don't see them until I check my monthly report. And every time, I wonder if it's just a clerical error, or if someone still has my spare key. I've been driving a reefer unit for a mid-sized produce company out of Kentucky for about 6 years now. Long hauls, sometimes a week at a time, mostly down through the South and Midwest. I'm not easily rattled. You see all kinds of stuff when you live on the road. But this one stuck with me in a way nothing else has. It started at a truck stop just outside Little Rock, Arkansas. Middle of July. Hot as hell, sun hammering down on the blacktop. I'd been driving since 4 a.m. and was dead on my feet by the time I pulled in. It was one of those combo truck plazas with showers, laundry, and a little diner attached. Packed lot, typical mix of long haulers and day runners. I went in to get a shower and some food. When I paid for the shower, the cashier handed me a little plastic key tag, room 3, and said, "Here you go." I took it and started walking toward the shower hallway when a guy behind me, mid-40s, stocky build, trucker ball cap, tapped my shoulder and said, "Hey, I think they gave you my key." I looked at the tag. He held up his also said room 3. Cashier must have messed up, I figured. I laughed, handed it back, and we swapped keys. He got 3, I got 5. No big deal. We both chuckled about it, and that was that. Or so I thought. I showered, ate, and got back to my rig around 2 p.m. It was a tight lot, and I remember thinking how exposed the whole row felt. No fencing on the west side, just a short grass slope and a few trees behind it. I locked up, shut the curtains, and passed out in the sleeper. At some point, maybe 6 or 7 p.m., I heard the familiar rattle of my door handle. Not a knock, not a scrape, a deliberate turn. Now, that happens sometimes, kids messing around, or someone drunk thinking it's their own truck. But this was smooth, quiet, intentional. I sat up fast and grabbed my pocket knife. Whoever was on the other side jiggled it again, like they were expecting it to open. But I locked my rig every time. Deadbolt and latch. I waited. Didn't move. My heartbeat in my ears. Eventually, I heard footsteps walk away toward the back of the trailer. I stayed silent for a good 10 minutes before peeking through the curtain. Lot looked the same. Nobody there. I didn't sleep much that night. Next morning, I checked the passenger side handle. Nothing looked forced. No scratches. I figured maybe someone had a key to a similar model and got confused. Still, I mentioned it to a fuel clerk as I left. He shrugged it off. Fast forward 2 days. I was making a drop in Memphis, and when I came back to the cab from checking in with the dock manager, I found the glove box open. Now I never leave it open. Inside, everything was there: insurance, spare charger, logbook, except for one thing. A little key ring I kept stashed in the back. It was just a cheap backup, cab door key, trailer padlock key, and a duplicate ignition key. Gone. I freaked out. Ripped the cab apart. Nothing else missing. Just the backup key ring. I changed my locks the next day. Paid out of pocket to have the cab rekeyed at a shop in Jackson. Bought a new padlock for the reefer. I felt stupid for not hiding them better. But something about it felt too clean. Like they knew exactly what to look for. For a while after that, nothing happened. I got comfortable again. Then, 2 weeks later, I was on a midnight layover at a quiet industrial park outside of Tulsa. It was a dead zone. No traffic, no lights, just a row of parked rigs. I'd pulled nose in toward a loading bay that wasn't in use and crashed out with the curtains drawn tight. At 3:21 a.m., I woke up to the door unlocking. Not banging. Not forced entry. Click. Like someone using the actual key. The door creaked open about an inch before I threw myself forward and kicked it shut from inside. I locked it again in a frenzy and yelled out, but whoever was there took off without a sound. I jumped into the seat and flipped the cab lights on. Door was fully closed. Nothing broken. Just opened and relocked from the outside. I called the police. Told them someone had tried to break in. They came, took a report, asked a few questions. I gave a vague description of the guy from the Arkansas truck stop, average build, gray cap, maybe a smoker, but I realized I couldn't even remember his face clearly. Just this generic, forgettable look. And then one of the officers asked something that chilled me. He said, "You ever give someone your key? Even by accident?" I paused, and it hit me like a gut punch, that mix-up at the shower counter. The key swap. What if he didn't give me the wrong key? What if that was the whole point? That guy hands me a key that looks like mine. I hand him mine, thinking it's a harmless swap. But in that moment, he now has a working copy of my cab key. My actual key, with my cuts, my number. And I just walked away like it was nothing. I checked with the truck plaza the next time I passed through. Asked if they kept logs of who was assigned which shower keys. The woman behind the counter looked confused. Said they don't record anything like that. It's all manual. Even if they did, I doubt the guy used his real name. He could have been following me for days before that. Could have picked me for any reason. Hell, maybe he does this often. Just waits for some sleep-deprived driver to hand over their life by mistake. Since then, I've installed a second deadbolt inside the cab that can't be unlocked from outside, even with a key. I wedge a metal bar into the footwell every night. I added motion lights, extra cams, the whole 9 yards. But I haven't forgotten that feeling. Of hearing your door unlock at 3 a.m. Of knowing someone was inside your truck while you slept. Of realizing you let them in, all because of a damn key swap and a dumb laugh. So yeah, if you drive, if you live on the road, watch your keys. And never, ever trade one without checking twice. I've been driving solo hauls for almost 8 years now. Reefer loads mostly groceries, perishables. It's not glamorous, but it keeps me moving. The rhythm of the road suits me. You get into a zone after a while, especially doing night runs. Just you, the hum of the tires, and the occasional 24-hour diner to remind you you're not completely invisible. But something happened last summer in Florida that I still can't explain, not to myself, not to the cops, not even to the company. It was late June, humid as hell. I just finished a delivery into a Kroger warehouse on the outskirts of Tallahassee. Got in a little after midnight. Took about an hour and a half to offload everything. By the time I was unhooked, I was too wiped to keep going, so I parked at a diner lot down the road, one of those 24-hour joints where truckers post up for a few hours. I remember checking my phone when I killed the engine. It was 2:12 a.m. I cracked the window just enough to let the breeze in, set an alarm for 5:30, and laid down in the sleeper. The next thing I remember is waking up, drenched in sweat, cab lights on, engine idling. The first thing that struck me was that the door was open. Driver's side. Not fully, just ajar by a few inches. I sat up fast, heart racing. Checked the cab, no one in sight. Pulled the door shut, locked it, then looked at the clock. 5:21 a.m. So 3 hours. But here's the thing, my alarm hadn't gone off. In fact, my phone was gone. Vanished. Not on the dash, not in the sleeper, not on the floor. Just gone. So was my wallet. I immediately assumed I'd been robbed. Happens. Maybe someone slipped in, found what they could, got out quiet. But I kept thinking about the engine. It was running. I didn't fall asleep with it on. I remember turning it off to save fuel and because the starter had been sticky. No way I left it on. And then there was the knife. I keep a backup folding blade in the dash cubby. Nothing special, just a habit from an old friend who used to drive armed. I hadn't touched it in weeks. That morning, it was lying open on the passenger seat, right on top of a sealed bottle of water I didn't remember buying. I know that sounds small, but when you live in your cab, everything has its place. If something's off, you feel it instantly. That knife had no reason to be out, let alone opened and sitting beside something that wasn't mine. I got out and did a full walk around of the rig. Everything looked untouched. No busted latches, no damage. Trailer was empty and locked, just as I'd left it after the drop. But then I saw the tracks. The diner lot is dirt and gravel. There were fresh tire prints right up against my driver's side door, like someone had pulled up tight beside me at some point during the night. They weren't there when I parked. These were newer. Clean tread. I looked around, but by then the lot had a few more rigs and pickups parked. No way to tell who left them. I went inside the diner, thinking maybe someone saw something. Old guy behind the counter shook his head. "You were here all night?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Since a little after 2. He looked at me funny. "Nah, you pulled in just before 5. I remember, 'cause I was changing out the coffee." I told him that wasn't possible. I parked there 3 hours earlier, fell asleep in the lot. He just shrugged. "Maybe you moved. Maybe you left and came back." I didn't argue, but my stomach dropped. Something was wrong. When I got back to my cab, I noticed something else. There were 2 scuff marks on the inside of the windshield, almost like handprints. Smudges. I hadn't cleaned the glass in a week, and these were fresh, oily, like someone with greasy hands had pressed against it from inside. Both smears were on the passenger side, right by the sun visor. I started the truck and drove straight to a Walmart. Bought a cheap phone and activated it on a burner plan so I could at least call dispatch. They weren't happy about the delay, but I didn't tell them the whole story, just said I'd been robbed, lost my wallet and phone. They told me to file a report and get to my next load. I did file a police report, mostly for the stolen items. The officer was polite, asked the usual questions, but I could tell he thought I'd just been careless. Then he asked something I didn't expect. "Do you remember if your truck was locked?" I paused. I always lock it. It's muscle memory at this point. But truth was, I couldn't say for certain that night. I'd been so tired after the drop. Maybe I slipped. Still, the part that keeps circling back in my head is this. The engine. Someone turned it on. Someone opened the door. Someone went through my stuff, drank water in my cab, and left the door open just enough that I'd wake up confused, not alert. Like they wanted me just disoriented enough not to ask the right questions. I tried to pull GPS data later. Our fleet system logs routes, rest stops, idling time. I had to file a request with the company, and when I finally got the readout, I felt sick. Between 2:18 and 5:06 a.m., my truck was in motion. A loop. About 35 miles. No tolls, no fuel receipts, no stops. Just a long, slow detour through a stretch of back roads northeast of the city. Then back to the diner. The company chalked it up to a GPS error. Said maybe I was moving in the yard and it bounced. But that doesn't explain the tire marks. The engine. The missing knife. The empty seat beside me. The scuffed glass. The part of me that knew something was wrong the second I woke up. I haven't told many people this. No one wants to hear their driver might have been taken for 3 hours without knowing it. Especially when the driver himself can't say if he left willingly. But since that morning, I do things different. I lock the cab twice. Once with the fob, once manually. I wedge a piece of rebar through the seat frame at night, between the pedals. I keep a body cam mounted above the bunk, recording everything when I sleep. And I don't park at that diner anymore. Last month I drove through Tallahassee again. I didn't plan to stop, but I passed that same lot, just out of curiosity. It was empty except for one thing. A single water bottle, sitting upright on the curb, unopened, label torn halfway off, just like the one that ended up on my passenger seat that morning I woke up, sweating, panicked, and missing 3 hours of my life. I was driving a load of frozen goods from Kansas City down to Laredo, running solo. Not a long haul, but the timing sucked. I had to hit a drop window by 9 a.m., which meant I'd be rolling through central Texas around 3 or 4 in the morning, that dead zone of the night when your brain starts trying to trick you into stopping, sleeping, or zoning out completely. Somewhere near the Oklahoma-Texas border, I pulled off I-35 for fuel and a piss break. It was one of those old, rural gas stations, faded signage, mostly dark, but the front windows still glowed under the buzzing halogen canopy lights. There was only one car parked outside, a silver Corolla with its hood popped. No one standing around it. The store was dead quiet when I stepped inside. Just the hum of refrigeration units and some faint country music playing from a speaker above the drink coolers. The girl behind the counter looked maybe 20, tops. Black hoodie, greasy bangs hanging in her face. Pale as hell. Not in a sick way, just like someone who didn't see the sun much. She didn't say a word when I walked in. Didn't even look at me right away. Just kept staring down at something under the counter. When I moved closer, she raised her head a little, made quick eye contact, and then just watched me. I nodded out of habit and went toward the back. Grabbed a bottled coffee and a bag of jerky, took a piss, and wandered back to the front. Still no other customers. I asked her if the pumps were working and she just blinked and nodded, like she didn't really process the question but knew what answer I expected. She rang me up without saying a single word. Just beeped everything, tapped the screen, and waited for me to swipe. No small talk. No, have a good one. Nothing. As I walked out, I glanced over my shoulder. She was still watching me. Not suspicious. Not flirty. Just fixed. Like she was studying something, and I happened to be it. I remember thinking, that's one of the weirdest customer service interactions I've had in a while. But I chalked it up to night shift weirdness. I've worked graveyards before. You go numb after a while. I fueled up, logged my numbers, and decided to park in the side lot for a quick 30-minute nap. Engine off, cab dark, doors locked. I set an alarm for 4:10 a.m. At 4:03, I woke up to knocking. Not loud. Just 2 soft taps on the driver's side glass. I sat up fast, heart spiking. My curtain was half drawn, so I peeked out and saw nothing. No one outside. I cracked the door just enough to scan around. The lot was still. No movement, no cars driving by. The Corolla was gone. I told myself maybe I dreamed the knock. My head hadn't been right for hours. Sleep deprivation messes with you. I got back on the road and made it to the Laredo drop without issue. But later that afternoon, I noticed something weird when I went to upload my receipt and logbook photos for the company. The timestamp on the gas station receipt said 4:44 a.m. That made no sense. I was already long gone by then. I woke up from that nap before 4:10 and drove off. I clearly remembered checking my dashcam time. I figured it had to be a system error. Except when I went to check my dashcam footage, the camera had recorded a gap between 3:58 and 4:46 a.m. Just static. No files. Almost 50 minutes missing. That really messed with me. So, on my next loop up north a week later, I deliberately routed myself through that same stretch. Same gas station. Just to settle my nerves. This time, I stopped during the day, around 1 p.m. clear skies, full lot, people everywhere. The station looked totally different in daylight, smaller, even more run down than I remembered. Windows dusty. Cooler section half-stocked. A trucker was arguing with a guy about a credit card machine. And behind the register was an older man, gray beard, John Deere cap. Looked like he'd been working there 20 years. I bought another drink and asked casually, "Hey, was there a girl working the night shift last week?" Real quiet, dark hoodie. The man frowned. "Girl?" he repeated. "Yeah," I said. I came through around 3:30 a.m. Monday night. She was working the register. He shook his head. "Nobody on that shift but me, buddy. I've been covering nights for the past 3 weeks." I stared at him. "No offense," I said, "but I was definitely here." She rang me up. Real pale, didn't say much. Kinda out of it. He kept shaking his head, a little firmer now. "You got the wrong place. I work solo graveyard here, 6 nights a week. Only help I had last month was my nephew for 1 weekend, and that kid's 28 and built like a linebacker." I pulled up my bank app, showed him the transaction. "Look," I said, "right there. This store. For 44 a.m. He leaned over, looked closely, and went quiet. "That can't be right," he muttered. "Why not?" He pointed toward the back office. "We shut down the registers between 4:30 and 5 every night for system updates. No one can process payments during that window." We both stared at my phone. I didn't know what to say. He didn't either. Eventually, he asked if I wanted a refund or something, but I told him no. I just left. But as I got back in my truck, I glanced at the security camera mounted on the canopy over Pump 2, the same one I'd parked at that night. It was pointed right at the front door. I don't know if it records or if they just keep it for show, but part of me wants to go back and ask to see the footage. Part of me doesn't. Because if what that guy said is true, if there was no girl working that shift, and the system was shut down when my receipt says I paid, then I don't know who I saw behind that register. And I really don't want to know who knocked on my cab door that night. I've been driving trucks for a little over a decade. I run solo, mostly driving freight, and stick to the Midwest and Southwest runs. I don't mind the solitude. In fact, I like it. Being on the road keeps things simple. Deliver, rest, repeat. I avoid drama, politics, and especially other people's problems. That's why I never pick up hitchhikers. It's not even about safety, really, just policy and common sense. You don't invite variables into your rig. You never know who someone really is or what they're running from. But last August, somewhere between Gallup and Albuquerque, I broke that rule. It was about 9:30 at night, sun long gone, and the desert was pitch black except for the occasional glare from a passing semi. I was hauling a light load east on I-40, trying to make Oklahoma City by morning. I stopped at one of those tiny truck pull-offs, no buildings, just a gravel turnout and a single trash barrel, to take a leak and stretch my legs. That's when I saw him. He was standing about 20 feet from my trailer, just outside the splash of my brake lights. Early 30s maybe, wearing a reflective vest, work boots, and a ball cap. He had a duffel slung over his shoulder and one hand raised like he didn't want to startle me. "Hey man, sorry," he said quickly. "Didn't mean to spook you. I've been walking since Winslow. Got dumped at the last way station." His voice cracked a little. He looked exhausted. Said he was another driver, claimed his co-driver took off with the rig during his sleep break and left him stranded. He rattled off some trucker lingo, talked about e-logs, DOT rules, and the kind of dispatchers who'll screw you to save 5 cents a mile. It all sounded legit. "Just need to get to the next major stop," he said. "I can pay you. Or just ride quiet. Whatever works." I hesitated, but he had that look, sunburned, eyes bloodshot, sweat dried in the folds of his neck. I've seen a lot of BS in this job, but I didn't get that vibe from him. He didn't beg, didn't play the pity card. I told him I could take him as far as Tucumcari. He nodded, slung his bag up into the cab, and climbed in. The first hour or so was fine. We mostly rode in silence. I offered him a bottle of water, and he downed it in 3 gulps. Said his name was Kyle. Worked reefer freight out of Phoenix. I asked about his company. He gave a name I vaguely recognized. Nothing shady. He didn't talk much after that. Just stared out the window and rubbed his fingers together constantly, that little motion you see when someone's coming down off too much caffeine or not enough sleep. We hit a Love's just after midnight. I fueled up and grabbed a snack while he used the restroom. We didn't say much. I assumed he'd fall asleep once we got moving again. But when I got back to the truck and climbed in, something felt different. He wasn't asleep. He was sitting perfectly straight, hands on his knees, eyes locked on the windshield like we were about to roll into a firefight. His duffel was still on the floor, but zipped all the way up now. Earlier, I'd seen it half open, clothes, a notebook, maybe a phone charger. Now, it looked stuffed. Overstuffed. I started the engine and glanced at him. "You good?" He turned slowly, like he hadn't realized I was even talking. "Yeah," he said. "Just thinking." I nodded and put us back on the highway. Around 2:30 a.m., he finally broke the silence. "You ever think about how easy it'd be to disappear out here?" I didn't answer at first. I was too tired for games. He kept going. "I mean, if you wanted to, really wanted to, you could walk 5 minutes off the road and no one find you for weeks." I gave a tight laugh. "Yeah, well, if you do that, make sure it's not near my truck. I don't need the paperwork." He didn't laugh, just smiled faintly. Eventually, we reached Tucumcari. I pulled into the TA lot and told him this was my stop. He nodded, grabbed his bag, and climbed out without a word. He didn't thank me. He just walked across the lot, past the fuel island, and disappeared behind the building. I sat for a minute, rubbed my eyes, and drove around to the other side of the lot to find a spot to sleep. That should have been the end of it. But around 10 a.m., after a solid few hours of sleep, I walked into the diner to grab coffee. As I passed the cashier, I caught a glimpse of something on the small bulletin board by the bathrooms. It was a missing person flyer. The picture stopped me cold. Same guy, same build, same face, even the same cap. But the name was different. Flyer said his name was Nathan Cole. Last seen in Yuma, Arizona. Family hadn't heard from him in over 3 weeks. Description matched down to the scar on his left cheek, the one I'd noticed when he was drinking water in my cab. I stared at that flyer for a long time. Eventually, I asked the guy behind the counter how long it had been up. He shrugged. Couple days. Cops dropped it off. I walked the lot, checked the fuel islands, even asked around a bit. No one remembered seeing him that morning. Later that afternoon, I stopped at a rest area near Amarillo. As I came out of the bathroom, I passed a guy walking toward me. He didn't look at me. Different clothes, button-down shirt, slacks. No duffel, no hat, but I recognized the scar. It was him. He walked past me like a total stranger. No flicker of recognition, no tension, nothing. Like I was just another face on the road. I stood there for a second, frozen. Part of me wanted to follow him, say something, do something, but I didn't. I got back in my truck and kept driving, and I've been thinking about it ever since. He didn't ask where I was going. He didn't care, because I don't think he ever needed a ride. I think you just needed a way to leave something behind.